In this video we're gonna talk about my most used camera gear in 2021. The year is coming to an end and I did reflect on my camera gear I used the most throughout 2021, and I thought now it's a good time to share with you my thought process of every single piece of gear I used on a weekly basis, the pros and cons, and you don't always need the best, newest gear on the market. And if you're new to the channel, I'm Florian, good to see you. On this channel we talk about photography, videography, tips, tricks, settings and everything else what belongs to it. So if this is of interest for you guys, you might want to think about hitting a subscribe button, like this video, comment, let me know your thought process, and without further saying, let's dive into it. I actually have used way less gear than expected throughout the year. For photography, my main camera is the Fujifilm X-T3 and I found this camera holds very nicely up still in 2021 and potentially also in 2022. And for a lot of you guys, it's probably still a good purchase when you're looking to purchase a camera for photography. 26 megapixel, shoots up to 4K 60 frames per second with a slight crop, cine 4K 120 frames per second, slow motion in full HD. The Fujifilm X-T3 is my main camera for photography for one simple reason: for the tilt screen rather than a flip out screen, because it just makes life easier a bit when you do a lot of photography with the Fujifilm X-T3. My second camera which I purchased this year is actually the Fujifilm X-T4, mainly for videography, for my filming, vlogging or anything what is related to filming content. And there been basically one major reason for it. It was for the flip out screen, and I'm actually using the Fujifilm X-T4 right now to film this video. Having a flip out screen right now when you're doing content creation is definitely handy. However, you could use the Fujifilm X-T3 for vlogging as well, and you put this tiny little mirror on top of your camera which will reflect from your screen. However, having a proper flip out screen is definitely handy. So yeah, the Fujifilm X-T4 shoots up to 240 frames per second slow motion, 4K up to 60 frames per second, cine 4K, so everything what I need the Fujifilm X-T4 delivers. However, of course, there are also a few downsides. The autofocus is pretty good, not perfect, but we're coming down to this in a different video when I'm doing my long-term review on a Fujifilm X-T4. One of my main used lenses is actually the 18-55 Fujifilm's kit lens. And this surprises maybe some of you guys, but I found the Fujifilm 18-55 a very decent lens. A little downside to this lens is it is a variable aperture from f2.8 at the widest at 18mm down to f4 at 55mm. But let's say you would be out on a sunny day, you probably close down the aperture to f4 anyway. You use a variable ND filter to balance your shutter speed to your environment. Therefore, I don't think that variable aperture is always a downside. Yes, of course, sometimes it can be a downside, and when you zoom a lot or you do a lot of zooming work, then potentially variable aperture might be a down point. I found this lens also decently sharp, and the size and weight is just very nice to carry around. Of course, sometimes I think a 16-55 would be nice to have for the constant aperture of f2.8. But as in general, if you start out, I think the 18-55 will please you in many ways. Another lens I bought this year is actually the 10-24 f4. Fujifilm's wide angle lens. It's unfortunately a f4. I said in many videos you can work around with the f4, but sometimes it would have been nice if this lens would have been an f2.8. Right now, after Fuji brought basically an updated version of this lens out on the market, if they would have done an f2.8, would have been fantastic, and it probably would have been my main to-go lens for a lot of subjects. However, the thing what I like about the 10-24 is a variation you get. The zoom range from 10-24 or your 16-35 in full frame terms. It's just handy, and I could show you a lot of surroundings. I can zoom out, show you the surroundings and zoom back in to the point where I need. A little downside to this lens is when you film with a 10-24 and you zoom, and you might have seen this right now, the aperture, or basically your exposure, will change throughout the zooming process. And I don't know why, but as you can tell, it goes brighter, it goes darker when you zoom with your 10-24. And I don't know why this has happened. However, Fujifilm might address this if possible with the software update. However, also Tamron might brings out a 10-21, I think it is, next year, with an aperture of f2.8, and I'm actually looking forward to this lens, and I would like to try this lens out. So Tamron, if you watch my video by any chance, it would be fantastic to get my hands on this lens, because sometimes I do miss an aperture of f2.8 just to get a bit more background blur, and also just to gather more light into the sensor. However, the 10-24 is a fantastic lens. It's decently sharp and it gives you a nice blurry background even with the aperture of f4. A little downside to this lens is that if you vlog with it, you need to be careful, you need to stand very still, otherwise you get those wobbles in a corner. But this is purely down to because it is a wide angle lens, and the sensor need to work very hard to try to balance those wobbles out. And sometimes you got some, so always good or beneficial if you could put down your camera with a tripod when you're using a 10-24 for vlogging. Otherwise you just need to agree to it that your footage might be a bit wobbly in the corners. So now we're coming basically down to one of my most favorite lenses within a Fujifilm lens lineup, and you might be surprised that it's not the 56 1.2, not the 50 1.0, it's actually the 50-140 f2.8 constant aperture. This lens is a fantastic lens. It is a bit pricey, but the images you get out of this lens is absolutely amazing. It's sharp from the corner to corner. You get a nice blurry background with this lens, and I don't have many issues with this lens at all. The autofocus is fast, you got the wide aperture, you got a nice compression when you zoom out to 140mm, which is equivalent in full frame. I'm gonna leave it down here because I can't break it down in my head right now, but it's equivalent to your 70-200 in full frame terms. It's weather resistant, it is a bit heavy, which is a slight downside, but you get nice quality out of this lens. And wherever I go, whatever I do, this lens goes into my backpack, and I'm not leaving this lens at home. I might leave every other lens at home, my 56 1.2, and I'd rather take a 50-140 with me, but that's personal preference, and I'm very happy with this lens. And I might do an updated review on this one as well at some point, but this lens definitely goes in my bag. So, and then for all my drone footages, I'm still using a DJI Mavic Mini 2. And I don't think I'm gonna upgrade the DJI Mavic Mini 2 very soon, and there are a few reasons for it. Flight time up to 30 minutes, you got 4K up to 30 frames per second, you got 2.7K up to 60 frames per second, and overall this drone delivers what you're looking for. Yes, you can't fly it when it's too windy, but overall it's easy to use this drone. You don't have many regulations either, so you could fly it in a city center, you could fly it over a few people, you could fly it on a beach and no one can say anything because it falls under the regulation. Therefore you might capture images which other people can't capture. So 100 megabytes for this footage is absolutely enough as well. You can color grade it to a certain extent. Of course you need to be careful not to break the footage. However, overall I'm very happy with the DJI Mavic Mini 2, and I got some stunning images out of this little drone. Of course, if you use some ND filters to try to improve your quality of footage as well, it will help. And this is basically my most used camera gear in 2021. And quite frankly, it did deliver what I've been looking for. Yes, some lenses are f4, some lenses are variable aperture from f2.8 up to 4, and one lens is basically a constant aperture of f2.8. But overall, in generally speaking, it doesn't need to be always a f2.8. Keep in mind also that the f4 lens potentially might be cheaper than an f2.8 lens, And a lot of things comes also down to your lighting, to the situation or the moment you are at. How's the light, how's the composition of your picture, what is a picture telling in generally or the video. So you don't need always the best, newest and greatest gear. Sometimes buying a second-hand lens or f4 lens will deliver what you're looking for as well. And with that said, guys, I hope you liked this video. If you got any questions, any comments towards the gear I use, let me know in the comments. And with that said, like, comment and subscribe, and I'm gonna see you, my friend, very soon in another video. Cheers, guys.